Hi there. Few microphone issues there. Hope you enjoyed that first session. We're now going to move into our second session, and it's my pleasure to introduce our next guests. First, we have Steve Minney, the Head of Student Recruitment at Swansea. His extensive experience not only spans student recruitment and marketing, but higher education transition, curriculum design, straight through to admissions policy. And Steve also serves as the chair of the UCAS policy group in Wales, and he's a member of the UCAS Council. In simple terms, he is a delightfully knowledgeable person, and he's always willing to share that wealth of knowledge that he has with people across the sector. Joining him today is Vicky Conroy, a marketing consultant at SMRS. It's no secret that Vicky excels at delivering and implementing effective and innovative strategy solutions for universities. And with her 8 years here at the SMRS, she's led on numerous large-scale consultancy projects for institutions like Portsmouth, Glasgow, Loughborough, and Birmingham City. So we're delighted that they've joined us today to talk about their experience of the Student Pulse pilot. So could you please join me in welcoming Steve and Vicky to the stage?
Thank you, Joe. We're going to crack on. So I'm just going to do a very quick intro about who SMRS are. We are a culture, brand and communications business. We've been around for about 25 years, probably a bit longer actually now. We work with multiple higher education institutions, both in the UK and internationally. And as Joe kind of explained there when she was doing her introduction with me, we work with universities to help with marketing, and that could be strategies, helping them solve problems and come up with solutions to the challenges that we face in higher education. And I'm Vicky, and this is Steve.
A picture of me from 1948 there. Yep.
Yeah, I skipped past my picture very quickly as well. It's definitely not the most flattering. So, if we think about a student's experience then, it's very personal, it's very individual, and across that kind of student journey, there's lots of ups and downs. There are points for individuals which are really high, and there are points where there are lows as well. And to understand that experience, we need to measure how individuals are feeling at each of those points, what their experience is, and we can then start to support and engage with them and progress them through that student journey. And this is where we wanted to then introduce Student Pulse. So Student Pulse is a platform that allows you to distribute micro surveys, so short 2-5 minute micro surveys to applicants, students at relevant points in the application journey. The kind of key things really about this platform is that it asks the right questions at the right time in the cycle. So this is very much in the moment. Normally, if we think about surveying our applicants, our students, is asking them to kind of reflect back on a time period, look back at the application window and ask them to recall their experiences. But this is very much, real time, in the moment, how are you feeling, so we can understand a little bit more about that journey. The length of the check-in, being a micro-survey, it completely, promotes engagement, and we get extremely high participation rates. We're going to talk about those a little bit later on in the session, but essentially, we're seeing much stronger results than we would see from a longer form traditional survey. The data collection from a university perspective, it allows universities to understand, to measure how individuals are feeling, as I've said, but also around improving perception. So thinking about how applicants and students feel about you as a university and what you might want to do to start improving people's opinions of you by kind of thinking about different ways to communicate your brand. But it also gives universities opportunities to think about sentiment and how people feel about you, again, in the moment. And finally, it's about improving experience ultimately. So if there is something that you can do at that point in the cycle to manage expectations and give applicants a more positive experience, then that will be highlighted through the short check-ins that they'll receive. It gives real-time feedback, and this is super important because we can then make adjustments, we can intervene, we can offer support, we can offer guidance and advice to help at that moment when individuals are having potential challenges and progress them through the rest of the student journey. The way that we structure these check-ins, we suggest sending them out on a regular basis. So that could be every couple of weeks or at least once a month. So by doing that kind of regular distribution, you're able to look at how opinions change. You've kind of set yourself benchmarks and metrics. And again, you know, things, because our journeys are so up and down when it comes to thinking about applying to university and going through that process, you can start to see how things shift and change over that time period. The platform itself is so simple to use. We will give you a bit of a demo later on in the session, and you'll see exactly how simple and easy it is to use the platform. It allows universities to be able to reach individuals at scale, and it also helps in terms of kind of saving costs and resources. It's really not resource intensive, which is fantastic for university marketing teams. And finally, there is no need to integrate with existing tech. It's not complicated at all. It sets itself as a kind of standalone platform, so it's really simple and easy to use. But the kind of key thing here is that it supports applicants in their moment of need to overcome challenges. So I'm going to hand over to Steve, and he's going to show you a quick demo of the Student Pulse platform.
Thanks very much. Just a couple of quick words of intro, really. I work at a medium tariff, fairly successful recruiting university. Every year our home undergrad intake is roughly 4,500. Pretty much every year our clearing intake is anything between 1,300 and 1,500. So that's really large, obviously. We work very hard over an extended period of time to have multiple touch points. You know, clearing is not the first time those 1,500 people encounter us, obviously. Last October, I saw a presentation by John Kirk, who I think is going to be speaking immediately after this, introducing the Student Pulse platform. I took one look at it and thought, we'll definitely use that, if at all possible, because it's a really novel way for us to communicate with our students. As I say, we're medium tariff, we have to be persuasive, we're always looking for an edge, if at all possible. So that's how the pilot came about, basically. A lot of fun working on the project. One of the things I would sort of start off by saying, you'll see it in the demo very clearly. The quality of the writing, I think, is absolutely crucial, and the creative. We didn't want to ask questions within a survey. We really wanted to use positive psychology, come up with statements that students would agree with, wherever possible. So there were a couple of different things happening. My original intention was we would measure sentiment, but also we hopefully would be shaping sentiment as well, because people would be agreeing, we'd be reminding them why they applied to us in the first place, all of these sorts of things. And if not, they could say, why not? Right, it's best to just see it, isn't it? So it should be said that we distributed the surveys. We've done 5 so far at regular intervals. It goes by email and SMS. The vast majority of people do it on their phones. They tend to do it very quickly. So as you can see, first question, repeated question. It's really as simple as you tap. Fairly obvious what we wanted people to feel from that question. We were able to theme things, as you can see there. So, you know, the previous session was entirely about this. Yes, lots of students did want to know more about that. This is an example of where you'll go later. Belonging. So we really tried to theme our questions around research about, you know, what Generation Z is feeling and thinking.
You'll see here from the example, if individuals had any feedback, they could comment. If they gave something a lower score, it gave them the opportunity there to actually write exactly how they're feeling. And you might have seen a couple of black links that have popped up when a lower score was given.
We deployed this to all of our offer holders. It was incentivized, as you can see on the screen. So every time we deployed, someone won £100 cash. Massively drove engagement and completion, no doubt about it. So as a result of the questions, the platform takes us to there. So say living costs. If anyone sort of indicated that they really did want to know more about living costs in Swansea, it directly took them to booking platform for a webinar that we ran specifically on that area. The belonging issues, much more into student life, campus societies, all that sort of thing. So you connect up in all sorts of different ways. So you can measure how people are feeling and then do something about it. That's the really key thing. So these are some quite static examples. I think we'll talk a little bit more about some more direct interventions that we were able to come up with as well. Right, so this is an example of the kind of deployments that we had. So this was check-in 3, mid-March. We'd made most of our offers by then. We sent it to 8,300 people. Very strong open rate on the email. Again, that's partly about subject line creative, timing of send, those sorts of things. The click-through rate, very high compared to our normal comms. So we normally wouldn't get anywhere near that. So we're very pleased about that. This survey in total, there are a lot more starts than there are clicks and opens there. We follow up by SMS 24 hours later, and that's what explains the additional numbers, basically. But just from this one survey, this is a Student Pulse in advance forecast that we'd always get sort of over 80% completion once people start surveys. Again, that's way beyond anything we've ever done previously. We've used all sorts of different platforms to survey and collect feedback at different times. Very large volumes very quickly. When we deploy these, the response is usually very, very fast. We tended to send them out sort of late afternoon, early evening. Usually the responses, we were getting several thousand, we'd get over 1,000 completions within 2 to 3 hours, as fast as that. So you're nothing like our traditional surveys, much, much faster. The really key thing, and again, one of the reasons I wanted to do it was, it felt like just a unique opportunity to find out what people were thinking before they decided, rather than afterwards. So it really was a chance to get some live insight. I think that's a really key thing. So the word's been used a number of times already today by different speakers. This was about getting some insight, but more than anything, we wanted foresight. We wanted to know, what would they do next? What could we do to help manage people along that journey?
Okay, so this is an example. Once the check-in had been sent and we received all of that data, this is an example actually from check-in 3, so the performance you've just seen. This is the dashboard that universities can look at back end, which houses all of those responses. So it's really, really simple. It's a bit like, I guess, an MPS system, if people are familiar with that. So the scoring between the 0 and 10. And then you can see there how happy people are with the responses that they've given, whether they're kind of giving responses that we consider a bit more neutral, or the red there if they're a bit more skeptic, so are giving some of those lower scores. You have the different drivers, so that links to the different questions that were included in the survey. And you can click on these and actually delve a bit deeper, find out about comments and how people have interacted and engaged. So we'll just click on and show you an example for one of the questions.
So this was a recurring question. We always started with this, each survey. I'm having a good experience. We wanted that kind of positive reinforcement. The overwhelming number of responses to this particular survey score it very highly, 9 and 10. That's what we're after. The distribution down here is very low. Being able to share snapshots of this dashboard around the institution, particularly with our senior leadership team, really powerful because it gives them reassurance. There are other questions where there was a more even distribution, and people can just visualize, actually, there are quite a lot of clusters around 5, 6. We need to move them that way. What is it that does that? So this is where I think Vicky said this, the simplicity is really powerful. One of the things I'm so impressed by with the platform is it is amazingly simple, and that is not easy to achieve. So the coding behind it, I think it's very, very strong. The potential seems enormous to me. But for each question, you get those scores. You get to see where they are. You rate your parameters. If someone basically is saying they're not having a good experience, they can tell you very specifically why. The surveys are anonymous. Boy, do they tell you why if they don't like something. It's immediate, and it's very, very fast, quick, and as I say, just unbelievable honesty, basically, before they've actually committed to a decision. So, okay.
Brilliant. So we're just going to wrap up before we hand over to you guys and think about questions. We just wanted to highlight what we see are some of the benefits, and Steve might add some more in from his perspective. But firstly, it's about providing that valuable support to improve student well-being and manage stress. You know, through that journey, it is extremely stressful. There's a lot going on. It's a massive decision for applicants. And we hope that by asking those questions in real time and providing the support and guidance, as Steve has shown there, some of those examples, that we are contributing to managing some of that stress and improving that well-being. It increases conversion rates. And that's because we are providing the information that individuals need. So we're asking them questions, but we are giving them something back. If they're saying to us, you know, actually, I'm not clear on the offer I've received, or I'm concerned about my offer and whether I'm going to make it, we can then give them that relevant information back to help them overcome that challenge. So that's super powerful. And in turn, it builds up a relationship between an applicant and a university, which is ultimately going to, you know, push up those conversion rates because you've got that more connected partnership. I'm going on to point 3 already here, but it does absolutely positively change the student and university relationship. And it's about that, creating that trust, that supportive culture, feeling like you're being cared for by your university that you're contacting. And finally, it provides an optimum student experience. So because we are able to ask questions at that relevant point in the cycle and intervene and potentially make changes off the back of that, it's providing a better experience for the individual as they progress through the student journey. Anything to add, Steve, or should we hand over to Joe?
No, I mean, basically just that I've always really believed that student recruitment is about listening, and this was a novel way to do it, and it seems really powerful. As I say, so an example would be, we were interested in reinforcing existing sentiment, definitely. One of our questions, for example, was, I'm confident about achieving the offer I've received from you. 90% of the answers to that said yes, they were. You think, great, we've reinforced that for them. If they weren't, they've given the opportunity to record their contact details, and it led to a conversation or a video call. Pretty much everyone who wasn't confident did that. We followed through. We end up with hundreds and hundreds of conversations where we get it, so it goes from this universal statement to a mass audience very quickly in a couple of taps to a totally personal experience. And I've never found anything else that did that, basically. So it's just, that's one of the more powerful aspects of it, I think.
Okay, I'm going to welcome Joe back onto the stage, and we're going to move into the panel Q&A.
Thank you, that's great. Thank you, Steve and Vicky, for that really interesting account of the pilot. Just before we open up to questions from the audience, I'm going to sneak in, I'm afraid. And the first question, Steve, I'd really love to know from your perspective, you know, what do you feel were the kind of top 3 benefits or insights that you gained from the deployment in your conversion activity?
Well, I mean, ultimately, the proof will be what happens to conversion, because that was our main goal. And, you know, DBD this week will reveal all, basically. Initial indications are good. Our trajectory is up, is increasing in a very challenging market. So that's one key element. I think I said earlier, it started out with me thinking, here's an opportunity to measure and shape sentiment. The more involvement I've had with it, the more my sort of views about it have changed, actually. And it's genuinely felt like an opportunity to listen to understand more than, I think originally I was probably thinking of it as listening to respond. But it's actually, because of the immediacy and the honesty in the feedback, it's really given us a sense of exactly what is it that people are concerned about. So that's enormous. And you know, the specifics are predictable. Their finance, their accommodation, their academic confidence, things of that nature. But I think there's definitely, you know, one of my big insights is there's no questions. People want to talk to us, and I think this was a new means to do so.
Incredibly authentic as well with that feedback, I feel. Vicky, one last question, then I promise, guys, you can ask both Vicky and Steve your questions. From your point, I know you covered, wonderfully the benefits, but what do you think really the unique value is that Student Pulse can bring to the sector?
Yeah, I mean, if we think about conversion, I'm sure, the university marketing teams in the audience will know it becomes more challenging year on year to convert your applicants. The market is extremely competitive. You're competing with more institutions than ever before. There are those alternative options that are becoming more attractive. In the session previously, we mentioned degree apprenticeships, but actually, not going into higher education with things such as the cost of living. So it's a challenging market. And if we think about traditional university conversion plans, and we've worked with lots of universities and seen them, they predominantly contain emails. They're email-led, and those emails are pushing out content that the universities feel the students need to know, and the students don't really get any sort of say in whether they receive that. They just receive that information. There might be other things on the plan, such as SMSs or calling campaigns or events and webinars. But actually for Student Pulse, I think it is something completely different in that conversion space. And I do think it adds real value because there is that value exchange. So you are asking a question from an individual, but you are then supporting them and giving something back. So you're giving them advice, you're giving them the opportunity to attend a webinar that, in Swansea's case, they put on a specific student finance webinar based on feedback around concerns about cost of living. You're giving them the opportunity to speak to somebody about something very specific, such as the offer concern. So for me, the value in Student Pulse is it's that in cycle, in moment ability to understand how people are feeling and react and give something back, help a student, and also create that kind of trusting relationship. So I think it will really stand out on conversion plans for universities.
A good example. Most people were having a very good experience and were looking forward to the seaside and all this sort of thing. But when they weren't, as I said, they were very blunt about why not. The scale of the response was incredibly useful to us. So, for example, when people said they weren't necessarily looking forward to the location, the feedback was basically all around cost. What was it that it cost to live on the campus? What were the campus hall prices? Those sorts of things. There was an ongoing internal debate about that at the university. We've got a lot of competition with private providers in the city, all this sort of stuff. But basically, we're able to go with a very large response pool to SLT and say, they're saying it's too expensive. We reduced our prices in cycle.
Yeah, which is amazing. It's very powerful, isn't it?
You'd be year two, maybe, to respond otherwise. So we literally did it in cycle. So, and it's persuade, as I say, that kind of trust then that you build with your senior team, because you're basically saying, this isn't what we think they think, they're telling us.
Yeah. Certainly brings that strategic agility, to your planning. I'm going to open up to the floor. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? At the front, hopefully there's a microphone on its way. Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you. Jess here from Prospects, part of JISC. I've just actually moved into the education sector 2 months ago for the first time in my career, so learning every day. Great presentation, thank you, and it looks like a wonderful product and very simple, as you say, which is great because research can be very convoluted. So my question was around the kind of the questionnaire and how that's set up. I noticed in the demo that when there's a question that's answered positively, it's basically quantitative, so it's just 9 or 10. And then where it's kind of on the detractor side, you've got that free format box. What was the decision making behind that, and how come you've decided not to ask for that qualitative feedback on the kind of higher scoring questions as well?
Yes, sure thing. I mean, we had a lot of freedom to decide, obviously, and as I said, we made a decision very early on. We didn't want it to be open-ended because we didn't think we'd get particularly large response. We wanted to create we wanted to follow the positive psychology already. And so you literally set the parameters. If anyone who scores less than 7, for example, that's when the text box will appear. And it did, and each question, we set slightly different parameters. And it followed from there. So generally speaking, when it was a statement that we were hoping, that sentiment would be in one particular place, or we were trying to push it towards that, we tend to set that bar fairly high. And for others, it was flipped. So if people didn't agree with the statement, there was ample opportunity for them to tell us why. So it was very fluid.
I think I would just add to that. We have actually been working with a couple of other clients as well who've been using Student Pulse, and some of them have actually set the opportunity to give feedback when they're giving a higher score. And back end in the dashboard, you can see when a comment comes through, the individual score that the person who's made that comment has given. And what we've actually found in those cases is that it's normally the people who are giving lower scores that then actually, comment or give feedback. If they're happy and agree with the statement, they're actually less likely to comment and say why. So it's more of that negative feedback, which is great.
Sorry, the intro screen said, on receiving it, the recipient's told it may take 2 to 3 minutes. Our experience is it was probably less than a minute, and that's why it's engaged with at such high levels. Survey 3 got 1,600 completions in 2.5 hours, in part because you can just go bang, 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 bang. We're all aware of shrinking attention spans, but the interesting thing is, it's quick, but when there's something you really want to say, the audience does.
That's great. And do we have any more questions from the audience? I think we've got someone hidden over there behind a pillar.
Hi, I'm Catherine from University of Bath. I was just wondering whether you sent the same surveys to international and UK-based offer holders, and whether the answer is yes or no, whether you saw any difference in responses.
Yeah, no, we've concentrated exclusively on home undergrad for now. The platform, I think you very quickly see, I don't work for Student Pulse or SMRS, but its potential seems absolutely vast, basically. So yes, conversion for current students as check-ins to measure. You've essentially got a permanently running version of NSS. And you get to ask the questions whenever you want. So we've used it for home undergrad for conversion right now. I see a lot of scope to use it right throughout the journey.
And just to add to that, we have just onboarded a client who are going to be running quite a few surveys actually to 6 different markets. So 1 UK and then 5 international markets. So each of the individual surveys will be bespoke to the different international markets. So unfortunately, I don't have results at the moment to tell you whether there are differences, but I would imagine there will be. And obviously, the types of questions that they're going to ask their international students will be slightly different, obviously, than the UK. But as Steve said, there is just so much scope with this platform to ask any of your audiences, international, UK, inquirers, applicants, and absolutely through the full kind of student journey.
Thank you. Is there any more questions? Okay. Well, I've got one last question just before we wrap up today. I think something that really stuck with me was the rawness and the brutal honesty that you found with some of the comments. And I'd really love to know that, could you share kind of any unexpected discoveries that you've encountered over the pilot so far? What was probably your favourite thing that kind of came through in the...
There were quite a few students who said they weren't keen on the location because it's not in England. And I thought they might have known that before they applied. So there was one. But no, there was a lot. And as I say, it started out with me very much thinking as a recruiter about, right, this is a persuasion tool. And we want them to feel a certain way because we want them to make a decision as a mass audience. It really does feel much more like, and I said this earlier, it feels like it's become a tool where we're listening to understand what is it that people actually feel and think. in some cases, it was really interesting that people's perceptions were negative the less they knew about the place. In some, it was the more they knew about the place, and all points in between, really. So it's hard to pin it down, but basically, I think that was the most surprising thing to me was just how raw and direct the feedback was. Yeah, because ordinarily, my experience with feedback over 20-odd years of open days and everything else is, you basically get the extremes. People who love it or hate it tell you why. In this case, if you felt strongly about it, you could just breeze through that quite quickly. If you didn't, you could be very specific about why not. So and it was the speed and intensity of that was the best part.
That's great, thank you. Well, thank you, Steve and Vicky. Thank you for that really fascinating account. We're just going to take a brief pause before our next session, so hopefully you'll stay with us. Thank you, folks.